going? Tristan here with Metroplex Bass Addicts, back to give you another video. Today we are going to do tournament breakdown video number 2 over our second TTO tournament of the year at Cedar Creek Lake out in East Texas. So let's jump right into it. So Cedar Creek Lake, for those of you who don't know, it's in East Texas in a city called Gun Barrel City. It's about an hour to an hour and a half east of Dallas. And the lake is a very recreational lake. There's a lot of people who use the lake, but not a lot of people fish it necessarily. It's got seawalls around basically the entire thing, docks everywhere, and there's always a lot of boaters out there. So a lot of us call it the washing machine as a joke because it gets so rough out there because there's so many boats throwing so many wakes, and the wakes have nowhere to go because they just bounce off the seawalls and back out into the lake. So it can make it a challenge, especially because it's a pretty big lake, and it can make it kind of hard to move around in a timely manner. So that's just a little bit of background on the lake. The lake has grass, it's got docks, it's got seawalls, it has rock, it has brush, it's got timber, it's got pretty much any kind of cover you could ever want. And so we knew going into the tournament, it was late March, it was March 27th here in Texas. The weather was kind of weird this year. We had a really cold winter, and we knew that there was probably going to be some fish spawning in areas of the lake, and then maybe other areas of the lake that were colder. There might still be some fish in pre-spawn, and there could even be some fish in areas of the lake that are post-spawn. So we practiced 3 days. We practiced the weekend before the tournament. We went up there, and then we also practiced the day before for the official practice day. And over those 3 practice days, we caught 3 keepers. And then a few shorts. It was one of our worst practices we've ever had, and we were really not super confident at all going into the tournament, other than the fact that on the last practice day, we did catch a few fish on kind of the same thing, and so we figured we might have a pattern. So come tournament morning, we just decided that we were going to run that pattern. We tried really hard in practice to find spawning fish and fish up shallow and in the backs of the cuts and under docks, and we just could not buy a bite doing that. I don't know what it was. I know after the tournament was over, we talked to a lot of people who said that they were catching them that way, catching fish off beds, catching them up shallow on a spinnerbait, on a frog, and all kinds of stuff, and we just couldn't get it going no matter where we went. So we decided to scrap the spawning fish plan, and we went after pre-spawn fish. And it was pretty simple. Basically all we did was we went to points, main lake points at the mouth of major arms, creek arms or spawning bays, and we would just idle along the point and down the bank a little bit, because all of the points look the same really, right? Like it's all just seawalls. And so we would idle the points with the side scan on the graph, and we were looking for points that had something different, not just the seawall and some sand. We were looking for a point that had maybe a brush pile on it, or a point that had a shell bed coming off at the very tip of it, or a point that had rock, deeper rock, or even just rock under the water that you can't see with your eyes. And the pattern we ended up finding was that last thing, the rock. So the pattern we were running was you would just idle by the point with your side scan on, and anytime you found a main lake point at the mouth of a major spawning bay or a major spawning arm that had the seawall but also had rock tucked up against the seawall underwater that you couldn't actually see with your eyes. The only way you could see the rock is using your side scan. That was where we got bit in the tournament. And so what ended up happening is we went to our starting spot in the tournament, which was the last spot that we had found in practice that kind of keyed us in on the pattern. And first things first, Ian hooks probably about a 4.5 pounder on a Texas rig, and it jumps off. And so we were a little discouraged at that point, just because that was the biggest fish we had seen in the lake up to that point that week. We hadn't caught anything that big in practice, or even seen anything that big in practice. So to have it on and lose it was kind of discouraging, but it gave us confidence that we were doing the right thing. And so we kept our heads down and kept casting, and we gave that spot probably about 20 or 30 more minutes. I think we actually did end up picking up one small keeper off of it. And then we ran to the only other spot on that side of the lake, the south side of the lake, that we had found that looked the same in practice. And in practice, we did actually catch a fish off this spot. We caught one short on a rattle trap off of it, but we never slowed down and threw, you know, a Texas rig or a wacky rig or a fluke or anything like that. So we figured maybe there's some bigger fish, we just were fishing too fast. So we went to this spot and we started fishing, and immediately, I think maybe my 4th or 5th cast, I caught our second keeper on a Carolina rig. And from that point on, it was just lights out. The wind kind of picked up for a little bit. It got a little bit cloudier, and they just started munching. We ended up catching, I don't even know, we probably caught somewhere between 30 and 40 fish that day between the two of us. And we ended up filling a limit. We had 16.12 pounds on 5. And that was good enough to get us 51st place out of 177 teams in the tournament. And we'll take it. We were ecstatic to even have a limit, considering, like I said, we only caught one fish for every day of practice for 3 days. We had no idea that we were going to stumble upon that pattern and end up putting a limit in the boat. And it was just awesome. It was a blessing to salvage the points. Because if we had zeroed, you know, we ended the year in 20th in Angler of the Year, and I don't think, if we hadn't found that pattern on the last day of practice and gotten that limit scraped together in that tournament, we wouldn't have been able to finish that high. So we were thankful for that. But it was really simple, just simple pre-spawn fishing. It's not really anything like in the last breakdown video where I was showing you guys pictures on the map of what, you know, a ditch looked like and what a pond looked like and what a shell bed looked like. It's not really that. You just pick a point at the mouth of a big arm or a bay, and you just start idling down the seawall along the point. And as soon as you see anything different, if you start to see rock, if you see a brush pile, if you see shell, start fishing it. It was that simple. And whenever the wind kind of picked up and the clouds came out, I know most people think of a dock bite, you know, normally when you're flipping docks, it's normally during, you know, low light, or not low light, high bluebird skies, not a lot of wind is normally the stereotypical dock pattern that works. But whenever the wind got up and it got a little cloudy outside that day, they abandoned the point and went under the docks. And it was just crazy. So after we caught them, you know, 2 or 3 off the point, and that wind started picking up, we just started going down the side of the point, and it was probably about a 1.5 mile stretch of seawall with rock, and then just docks every so often, maybe every 20, 30 feet there'd be a dock. And we just started flipping those docks along that rocky seawall point with the Texas rig. And that's how we actually ended up catching the 2 biggest ones. I think it was like a 5.5 and a 4.5. Both came off of flipping a Texas rig on a dock. Another thing that they were on that was interesting was anytime that we would come up to the seawall and there would be a set of steel stairs. So yeah, sorry, I had to take a phone call, but when the sun kind of went away and the clouds and the wind got up, they got under those docks and the stairs, that's what I was talking about. So when we come up to, every now and then in between the docks, there would be a set of steel stairs extending off of the seawall into the water. I guess it's just a way for the property owners to walk into the water easier when they want to swim. And those, in addition to the docks, those stairs were loaded as well with bass. Like you could pretty much call your shot. Every time you came to one and you flipped your Texas rig on it, you'd get bit. And sometimes you'd catch 3 or 4 bass on one set of stairs. So we hypothesized that it's possible that the bass could have actually been spawning underneath the stairs because the stairs were only in like 2 or 3 feet of water. The water was fairly clear and it was a nice like rocky, sandy bottom underneath them, and the stairs would provide a windbreak from the north wind. So it's possible some of the fish we were catching did have bloody tails. I'm not going to say for 100% certainty that they were spawning because we couldn't actually physically see them spawning on a bed or anything, but it is possible. So yeah, that's basically what we were doing. I'll show you the 2 rigs that we caught them on. You know, in practice we did catch a few on a chatterbait as well. but for the most part, it was these two rigs right here. The one that caught the most fish and the biggest fish was just the Texas rig. It's a 3/8 ounce Wu Tungsten never chip weight with a Wu Tungsten bobber stop. I have it on a 4/0 Mustad EWG worm hook. And then the bait is a real bassin beaver bug in a color that I actually designed. It's called East Texas Special. It's a take on summer craw, but it's got a slightly different shade on the green pumpkin. It's more of a pumpkin seed, and then it has a little hint of watermelon flake instead of just the black flake. But that was the color. So this color, and then Ian was throwing Guggen baits, bandito bug, in the summer craw color. It basically just had to have some shading of green pumpkin and some shading of chartreuse pepper. And they were keyed in on that for the Texas rig. And this was the bait that we were just flipping up underneath the docks and up on the stairs. And we even caught a few just dragging this, like the Carolina rig, on the points. My setup for this, it's a Denali Rods Covert Light series. It's the 7.2 medium heavy worm and jig rod. Great rod for throwing lighter to mid-weighted worms and jigs, Texas rigs, stuff like that. Fast action rod, so when you set the hook, you can really winch them out of the cover really quickly. The reel is an Ardent Summit Hawk in the 8:4:1 gear ratio. I like a fast gear ratio for throwing baits like Texas rigs and jigs, just because whenever they grab it, if they start running at you or if they run one way really quickly, you can pick up a lot of line really quickly and get a good hook set. And if you don't feel the bite and they just start swimming with it, and then you notice that your line's swimming, you can do the same thing where you pick up the line really quickly and set the hook and get a good hook set on them, versus setting the hook with half slack line and maybe not driving the hook all the way home. So that's why it's important to have a high speed gear ratio on your reel when you're throwing a Texas rig, or really any bottom bait, Carolina rig, Texas rig, jig, any bottom bait that you drag or hop that you throw on a bait cast setup. I like to have a high speed gear ratio, minimum 7.3. 7.0 or 7.3 would be the minimum gear ratio I would use for baits like this. So that's the Texas rig. The Carolina rig setup we were using, actually Ian didn't throw a Carolina rig. I was the only one throwing a Carolina rig. But my setup for that is, it's an 8-foot Denali Rods. It's the Attacks Mississippi River series. It's actually the 7'10", I call it an 8-foot rod, but the 7'10" extra heavy slop rod. It's actually made for throwing frogs and like punching up on the Mississippi River. It's part of their Mississippi River series, of the Attack series. But I really like it for dragging Carolina rigs, big jigs, and big Texas rig worms, like 10-inch worms on a 3/8 ounce weight. Just because it's an 8-foot rod, it's an extra heavy, it's a fast action, so I can pick up a lot of line on a hook set when I'm dragging bottom baits offshore or on a really long cast. And then since it's got that fast action tip and the heavy action of the rod, it drives the hook home really quickly, which is important for when you're throwing baits that you're dragging across the bottom in 15 to 30 plus foot of water, and you need to pick up a lot of line quickly on your hook set. It's important to have a long rod with a fast tip. The reel is the Ardent Apex Elite, and this one is the 7.3:1 gear ratio. Like I said, that is the lowest I will go for bottom baits. 7.0 to 1, 7.3 to 1, I will still use those for bottom baits. I like the slower side of the fast gear ratios, if that makes sense, for baits that I'm fishing in deeper water. Just because I have a longer rod and I have a little bit more time to pick up on them, versus when I'm flipping a Texas rig, I'm normally only about 10 to 20 yards from the bait, so I have to pick it up a lot quicker. I have to react a lot quicker. With this, I still want a fast ratio, but I can slow it down just a little bit into the 7s instead of the 8s, so that I get a little bit better feel and a better reaction time. So that was the rod and reel setup. I have, this one actually is 25-pound test Seaguar Invis-X fluorocarbon. The Texas rig setup is 20-pound Seaguar Invis-X fluorocarbon. And then the Carolina rig setup itself is Since I wasn't fishing this one in super deep water, I was only fishing it in like 5 to 10 foot. I didn't do a super long leader. I know most people, when they're throwing a Carolina rig, they'll do like a 3 or 3.5 foot leader. If I'm fishing in 15 plus foot of water, I will. But since we were only fishing 5 to 10 foot, or sometimes even shallower than that, I kept it at about 1.5 to 2 feet. I had a 3/0 Mustad EWG worm hook on there. The bait is the Real Bass and French Fry Daddy, and I just had it in green pumpkin. Simple bait. It's designed for Carolina rigging and finesse fishing. It has a natural float to it, so it kind of floated up off the bottom while I was Carolina rigging it. And then most people like to put a swivel on their Carolina rig and then tie the leader to it. But I actually learned this from your Lake Fork guide, Billy Lawson, shout out to him. You just put a bobber stop, you put your bead, your weight, your egg sinker, or barrel sinker, and then another bead, and then just put a single bobber stop. And it works really well as a Carolina rig. It works the exact same way, but then if you get snagged, instead of having to snap off your leader, if you just start to pull it back, it'll come up to the cover and catch, and then it'll just slide all of that, the weight and everything, down to your bait, almost like a Texas rig, and then you can go with your rod tip and knock it out of the snag of the cover. And so you actually break off your Carolina rig a lot less doing it this way than you would doing it the traditional way with a swivel and a leader. So that's just a cool little Carolina rig tip. Like I said, I did not come up with this. Billy Lawson from your Lake Fork Guide came up with this. I just took it from him, but it has definitely helped me lose a lot less Carolina rigs, and it still catches the exact same amount of fish. So that is the Carolina rig setup I was using. I did use one blue tungsten glass bead and one black one. It doesn't really matter the color of the bead. I just grabbed the first two I saw. The bead's more just for noise and to protect your knot. And then just a 1/2 ounce blue tungsten barrel sinker, never chip as well. I used a 1/2 ounce. Normally, if I'm fishing a Carolina rig in deeper water, I'll use a 1 or 1.5. But since we were only fishing, 3 to 10 foot of water, I just used a 1/2 ounce. And then I have a blue tungsten bobber stop to serve as like the swivel for the leader. And I would just slide it up the line about 1.5 or 2 feet. And that would be the rig. So those are the two rigs: Carolina rig and Texas rig on seawall points with rock underneath the water, and then flipping the docks and the dock stairs down the side of the point as we fished along. That was the entire pattern. Super simple. Like I said, we were fortunate to find it, and yeah, that's it. We appreciate y'all watching. I know this one was a little bit shorter than the Lake Fork one just because there was a lot less involved. It was a little later into the year. It was in that time when the fishing's getting good and it's a little bit more simple. You don't have to put as much thought into it. So let us know what y'all want to see next. The next tournament breakdown video, tournament breakdown number 3, will be from our TTO Kings of Cowtown qualifying event on Lake Worth. It was for the Kings of Cowtown Championship they put on. They do 3 qualifying events, and we only fished 1, and it happened to be that one. So that'll be the next video, the next tournament breakdown video. We'll break down how we caught them in that one, and we did, spoiler alert, we did end up qualifying for the Kings of Cowtown Championship in the event, so you'll kind of get to see our process for that. Super fun tournament, but yeah, thanks for watching. I will throw pictures up. I'll throw a picture up of a Google Earth image of what the point looked like. I won't throw up a picture of the exact point, but I'll throw up a picture of what it looks like. That way, if you're a little confused about what I was talking about with the side scan, you can kind of see what it looks like if you could see it with your eyes, and then you can kind of imagine what it looks like on the graph. I wish I had a picture of the graph, the side scan when we saw the rock, but I unfortunately don't. I'll see if I can find one, and I'll put that up as well. And then all of the gear, just like in the last video, will be linked in the description below, so y'all can go to the website and check out the gear we were using. And that's it. Thanks for watching.